Marissa Hale kissed her husband goodnight, then met her lover in the dark to plan his murder. By the time Dr. Grant Hale vanished without a trace, Cale Mercer was already waiting in the shadows, and a $4,800,000 0-cents life insurance policy had been quietly prepared. What looked like a tragic disappearance would unravel into one of the most chilling and calculated betrayals the small town of Asheville had ever seen. Who really vanished that morning? Grant Hale or the truth? To everyone who knew them, Marissa and Dr. Grant Hale were the golden couple of Asheville. Their faces appeared in charity event newsletters, their photos framed in the offices of local businesses they sponsored. Marissa, a former beauty queen turned lifestyle influencer, curated every moment of their life together for social media. Smiling brunches, designer outfits, intimate anniversary captions that went viral for their perceived sweetness. And Grant, with his calm, brilliant demeanor and impeccable suits, was the kind of man people trusted without question. He saved lives for a living. He had power, grace, and presence. Behind the curtain of their picture-perfect life, though, something far more complicated was unraveling. Grant was obsessed with control, not in an obvious, dramatic way, but in quiet, suffocating doses. He monitored the house's security cameras daily. He insisted on a strict diet for both of them. Even their vacations were scheduled down to the hour. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His expectations were understood, carved into the rhythm of their days. His compliments were rare, always transactional. If she looked good, it was because it reflected well on him. Marissa, once full of energy and charm, had begun to shrink. The sparkle people complimented her for was now reserved only for public appearances. At home, she moved like a ghost, soft-footed, silent, careful. Even the smallest disagreements turned into long silences from Grant, sometimes lasting days. He'd make her feel invisible, like she didn't matter, like she was just another piece of furniture in the house he built. She told herself for years that this was just what marriage looked like after a while, that people would kill for her lifestyle. That love wasn't always warm. But deep down, something in her was screaming, something she worked hard to keep buried beneath layers of foundation and curated smiles. The more lonely she became, the more attention she gave to her online following. Strangers adored her. They commented endlessly about how lucky she was, how beautiful her life looked. She soaked in their praise like sunlight. In the quiet hours, she would scroll through their comments, liking each one, pretending they were real connections. Her real life, after all, was growing darker. The mansion they lived in had 6 bedrooms but only 1 bed that was ever used. They hadn't been intimate in over a year. They slept under the same roof, but not in the same world. He spent more and more nights at the hospital, and when he did come home, he barely spoke. She began to wonder who he really was. She wondered if he even loved her anymore, or if he ever did. Then came the late-night phone calls. She didn't know who the woman was, only that the voice sounded young, breathy, and too familiar. Grant never admitted to anything, but Marissa had a way of noticing the things he wanted her to ignore. A second phone charger hidden in his office drawer. Lip gloss on the edge of his scrubs bag. Hotel charges from places they'd never visited together. Still, she said nothing. But she began to change. She started staying up late, locking herself in the guest room with her laptop. She began to research things. Things a wife shouldn't be curious about. Things like, how long before a missing person is declared dead, and can you track someone through a prepaid phone? She didn't think of doing anything, not yet, but the seeds of something dark had been planted. Marissa no longer felt afraid of losing Grant. She was beginning to feel afraid of herself. And no one saw it coming. Not even him. It was a stormy Friday night in October when Marissa first saw Cale Mercer. The bar wasn't the kind of place she normally went to, dimly lit, tucked between a pawn shop and a vape store, with cracked leather stools and a jukebox that hadn't been updated in decades. She had gone there on a whim, dressed down, hood up, hoping not to be recognized. Maybe she wanted to disappear for a night. Maybe she wanted to feel like someone else. Hale noticed her the moment she walked in, not because she was beautiful, though she was, but because she didn't fit. She looked like a stranger in exile, trying to blend into a world that wasn't hers, and that intrigued him. He served her a whiskey sour without asking what she wanted. She didn't send it back. She didn't say much at all that first night, but she stayed until closing. Something about him was different. He didn't ask about her life or her husband or why a woman like her was drinking alone. He didn't compliment her. He just talked. About things that made no sense, really. About old films, missing persons cases, strange facts about human behavior. But Marissa listened. She laughed. She felt something stir in her that she hadn't felt in years. Curiosity. She went back the next weekend, then the one after that. It became a habit, a secret ritual. No one followed her. No one cared where she went. Grant was either working late or not home at all. Hale was the opposite of Grant in every way. He didn't care about appearances. He had tattoos with meanings he wouldn't explain. He lived in a rented room above a motorcycle shop and worked 3 nights a week. He had no ambition to climb any ladder, no need to prove anything. But he had a magnetic pull. There was something dark about him, something slightly unhinged. But Marissa didn't turn away. In his presence, she didn't feel judged. She didn't feel small. She felt watched. Not in a threatening way, but in a way that made her feel visible again. He noticed her chipped nails, the way she never finished her drink, the way her fingers trembled when she talked about her quiet life. One night, 2 months after their first meeting, she kissed him in the back alley behind the bar. It was reckless, fast, like something out of a fever dream. She didn't even remember who made the first move. She only remembered the rain, the taste of bourbon, and the sudden, crushing feeling of relief that someone wanted her. That kiss opened a door that would never close again. The affair escalated quickly. What started as a once-a-week escape turned into a daily craving. She lied to everyone, friends, family, even herself. She started sneaking him into her world in small, careful ways: a burner phone, a secret debit card, a hotel 40 minutes away where no one knew them. But Hale wasn't content with being the secret. Slowly, carefully, he began to shape the conversation. He talked about freedom, about what life could be like if she wasn't tethered to a man who treated her like property. At first it was hypothetical, just thoughts, whispers. But then came the ideas, questions that hung heavy in the air long after they were spoken. What would happen if Grant just disappeared? Couldn't accidents happen in the mountains? Did she know how long it took for someone to be declared legally dead? Marissa never answered, but she didn't say no. There was a moment, sitting in Hale's truck one night, when something inside her shifted. It wasn't a sudden decision, not a dramatic revelation, just a slow, terrifying realization. She wasn't afraid of what might happen anymore. She was beginning to want it. And Hale, he could see it in her eyes. Marissa posted a photo on Instagram, a filtered shot of her in a silk robe holding a cup of coffee near the kitchen window, captioned, "Grateful for peaceful mornings." Grant wasn't in the photo. He never was, not anymore. He had left the house early, just before dawn. No kiss goodbye. No breakfast. Just a closed door and the sound of his car rolling down the long driveway. According to hospital records, he never showed up for his first surgery. That alone was strange. Grant Hale was known for being obsessively punctual. Nurses waited, patients were rescheduled, and by 10 a.m., his absence had triggered concern. By noon, a nurse called Marissa. She told them she hadn't heard from him all morning. That wasn't unusual, she said. Sometimes he went hiking before work to clear his head. It needs that time, she added. Her voice calm. Later that afternoon, police found his black Mercedes-Benz parked neatly at the trailhead of Devil's Ridge. It was a well-known hiking area, steep and treacherous in certain parts, known for its fog and sudden weather shifts. The car was locked. His phone was inside on the seat next to his wallet. There were no signs of struggle, no blood, no torn fabric or footprints leading into the woods, just emptiness. CS teams arrived within hours. Helicopters scanned the forest. Dogs were brought in. Volunteers from the hospital joined. But the woods gave up nothing. It was as if Grant had stepped out of his car and dissolved into the trees. That night, Marissa appeared outside their home to speak briefly with the news. Her makeup was flawless. Her voice was steady. She pleaded for help finding her husband, said he was deeply loved and needed at home. The clip went viral. People commented on how composed she seemed, how articulate she was under pressure. But others noticed something else. A strange absence behind her eyes. Inside the house, she was already burning evidence. She deleted emails. Factory reset her burner phone, disconnected the home security cameras. Friends later remembered her offering inconsistent stories, telling one friend that Grant had seemed depressed lately, and another that he was training for a marathon and might have overexerted himself. She cried in public, but in private, she barely flinched. Hale was nowhere to be found. Detectives combed through the usual leads, cell phone pings, financial records, surveillance footage, but nothing pointed directly to foul play. There was no proof of violence, no clear motive. Grant had no known enemies, no debt, no criminal ties. The only oddity was a recent $50,000 0-cents cash withdrawal from one of his private accounts. 3 days before he vanished. Marissa claimed to know nothing about it. Days turned to weeks. The case, cold from the start, began to freeze over. No body, no confession, no trail. Marissa wore black, attended a private vigil, and stopped posting on social media for a while. But just 48 hours after the vigil, a new photo appeared. A close-up of a candle, captioned, "Light will always return to darkness." It garnered thousands of likes. Sympathy poured in, but for the investigators still watching her, the post felt more like a performance than grief. Then came the first real break in the case. A hiker turned in a blurry photo from the day Grant disappeared. It was taken in passing, with no intention beyond capturing the foggy trail. But in the distance, barely visible, was the outline of a person dragging what appeared to be a long, heavy tarp into the woods. April 3rd, 6:32 a.m., exactly when Grant was supposed to be in surgery. The hiker hadn't thought much of it, until the news broke suddenly. That photo raised a terrifying question. Was Grant Hale ever on that trail, to hike at all? Or was he brought there to disappear? 7 months after Dr. Grant Hale's mysterious disappearance, the courts declared him legally dead. Marissa stood in the courtroom, dressed in black, her hair pulled back neatly, eyes hidden behind designer sunglasses. She didn't shed a single tear. Her lawyer did most of the talking. She claimed emotional exhaustion, trauma, and a desire to move on. The judge, citing lack of evidence and the duration of the search, signed the order. That signature changed everything. Within weeks, Marissa collected a $4,800,000 0-cents life insurance payout. The policy had been purchased just a year before Grant vanished, an unusually high-value plan with double indemnity for accidental death. Investigators had noticed the timing, but without a body, it was hard to argue murder. Paperwork spoke louder than suspicion. Marissa wasted no time. She sold the Asheville mansion within a month, closed her social media accounts, and quietly relocated to Miami. There was no farewell message, no tribute to her late husband. She simply disappeared, just like he had. Only she took the money with her. In Miami, she reinvented herself. She launched a luxury skincare brand called Aesthencia, featuring ethically sourced ingredients and vague promises of healing through purity. It was an overnight success. Influencers promoted her line. Magazine profiles praised her resilience. They called her a widow-turned-entrepreneur, a woman who had overcome tragedy and turned pain into purpose. But behind the branding and beachside launches, There was a shadow, and his name was Cale Mercer. He had reappeared almost as soon as the insurance check cleared. No longer hiding in the background, Cale was suddenly living in a waterfront condo, registered under a shell company connected to Marissa. He drove a white Jaguar, wore tailored shirts, and called himself her business consultant. No one questioned it. No one looked deeper. After all, he wasn't listed as an employee, he was just a companion. A very quiet one. Privately, the two of them lived as a couple, vacationing in Barbados, attending underground art shows, dining in places where no one cared who they were. But something about their relationship had changed. The passion was still there, but it was colder now, calculating. They were bound together not just by lust, but by something far darker. A secret they couldn't ever speak of, a weight they could never put down. And yet Marissa thrived. Her brand expanded. She hired a publicist. She gave interviews. Always vague, always careful. She never spoke Grant's name until one night, at an event in Brickell, a guest overheard her say something strange. She was sipping champagne, laughing with another entrepreneur when she leaned in and whispered, "I was made for this. No one gets here by accident." It was a harmless comment on the surface. But when that guest, who had once worked in Asheville, recognized her face and remembered the story, she contacted the police. That tip was small, barely a ripple, but it landed on the desk of someone who wasn't willing to let go of the past. Detective Rowan Everly. Everly was new to the Asheville Police Department, but had a reputation for noticing patterns others missed. Cold cases were his specialty, and when he reviewed the Hale file, something caught his eye. The insurance policy. The phone data inconsistencies. The unusual calm in Marissa's early interview, but most of all, the man she moved in with, Cale Mercer, a man with a sealed juvenile record, multiple aliases in 3 states, and no digital footprint until 2 months after Grant's disappearance. It wasn't just coincidence anymore. Everly reopened the case quietly. No announcements, no press. He began retracing every step, starting with the day Marissa met Cale. He began collecting receipts, surveillance footage, data logs, and financial transfers. He connected accounts. He cross-checked timestamps, and slowly a disturbing picture began to take shape. The perfect widow had moved on a little too perfectly, and the man she moved on with? He wasn't just a lover. He might have been the weapon. Detective Rowan Everly worked in silence. He didn't notify the press, didn't request assistance, and didn't want his investigation polluted by outside noise. He believed in watching from the shadows, letting people think they were safe. That's when they made mistakes. While the world celebrated Marissa Hale's comeback story, Everly combed through the digital wreckage she left behind. He pulled old security logs from the Hales' estate, even though the system had been disabled shortly after Grant's disappearance. Deep in the data archives, he found fragments, files that had never been erased properly. One showed a motion alert from the garage at 4:13 Hale evening, the morning Grant vanished. Another showed the front door opening just 2 minutes later. It was the timestamp that mattered. Grant had supposedly left for work at 5:00 a.m., but the system showed someone moving through the house nearly an hour earlier. There was no way to confirm who it was, but, paired with a deleted clip partially recovered from the driveway camera, it suggested 2 people leaving the house. Not one. Everly needed more. He found it buried in Cale Mercer's financial history. Cale had no credit cards, no bank accounts, nothing in his name. But a search through property records revealed that a condo in Fort Lauderdale had been purchased in cash just 10 days after Grant was declared dead. The buyer? A shell company, registered in Nevada, owned by another shell company in Delaware. That second company had been set up by a law firm in Asheville, the same law firm that handled the Hales' estate planning. It wasn't proof, but it was the first solid thread tying Cale and Marissa together financially. Then came the breakthrough. As a reviewing security footage from the trailhead where Grant's car was found, Everly discovered something that had been overlooked. A flash of brake lights at 5:06 a.m. Caught in the corner of a ranger's station camera, the car didn't match Grant's Mercedes. It was older, boxy, and dark gray. Everly enhanced the image and ran it through DMV databases. It was a 2006 Ford Explorer, registered to Cale's cousin, a man who had died 2 years earlier. The vehicle had never been reported stolen, never re-registered, and hadn't been ticketed in years. A ghost vehicle. Perfect for transporting something, or someone, without leaving a trace. Everly pulled Cale's cell tower data from the day Grant went missing. Though Cale had wiped his device and changed numbers, a tower ping from a backup data cache placed his phone within half a mile of Devil's Ridge trailhead between 5:00 and 6:00 a.m. Marissa, on the other hand, had never left her house. Her phone, at least, stayed connected to their Wi-Fi all morning. That was her alibi. But Everly suspected she wasn't in the house. He believed she left her phone behind deliberately, while Cale handled the physical part. He believed Marissa had planned the disappearance down to the minute, and that Cale had executed it with military precision. Still, belief wasn't evidence. Then came the anonymous envelope. It arrived in Everly's mailbox with no return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a note that read, "She thought no one was watching. She was wrong." The flash drive contained surveillance footage from a hotel in Asheville, taken 2 days before Grant disappeared. It showed Marissa and Cale in the parking garage. She handed him a heavy black duffel bag. He opened it slightly, then zipped it quickly. They didn't kiss. They didn't speak. But the tension between them was unmistakable. Everly froze the frame. Inside the bag, barely visible, was a coil of rope. This wasn't just a disappearance anymore. This was premeditated, coordinated, cold. And finally he had enough to move forward. He prepared the warrants, knowing the moment they realized they were being hunted, they'd try to vanish again. But this time, they wouldn't make it far. Detective Everly coordinated the raid with precision, dispatching 2 teams, one to Marissa's penthouse in Miami, and the other to Cale's condo on the opposite side of the city. The objective was simple: catch them before they had time to run. No press, no noise, no mistakes. At 6:11 a.m. Everly watched through binoculars from across the street as federal agents surrounded Marissa's high-rise. She was found in the master bathroom packing a toiletry bag. A burner phone was on the counter. A second passport lay inside a drawer beneath the sink. When they cuffed her, she didn't scream or cry. She just stared at the wall in silence, as if she had always known this day would come. Hale was arrested 15 minutes later while trying to exit through the building's underground garage. He had a duffel bag with $200,000, 0 cents in cash, a passport under a false name, and a .38 revolver. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. But in the surveillance footage from the garage, a single smirk crept across his face when he spotted the agents. The smirk of a man who had played a long game and still believed he might win. The charges were swift and staggering: conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, obstruction of justice, and destruction of evidence. But even with everything Everly had uncovered, there was still one glaring hole in the case. There was no body. Without Grant Hale's remains, the prosecution knew a murder conviction would be an uphill battle. The defense would argue that he had faked his own death, or that there had been no crime at all. All the evidence was circumstantial: the footage, the money, the rope. It painted a picture, but not a definitive one. The court needed a body to make it real. That's when the story took its final and darkest turn. 3 days after the arrests, a local news crew received an unmarked envelope containing GPS coordinates. They passed it to the police. Everly led the recovery team into a remote area of Devil's Ridge, far off the marked trails, deep in the woods where no one dared go. They found him beneath a cluster of jagged rocks, wrapped in the same heavy black tarp that appeared in the blurry photo from the hiker's camera. The body was almost fully decomposed, but dental records confirmed what Everly already knew. Dr. Grant Hale had not disappeared. He had been executed. Autopsy reports revealed a single, precise blow to the back of the skull, no signs of struggle, no broken bones. He had likely been struck from behind, possibly while unconscious. He was quick, efficient, planned, and now, finally, it was undeniable. The trial gripped the nation. Marissa and Cale's affair became the centerpiece of endless media coverage. Tabloids dissected every detail, her wardrobe, his smirk, the footage of the duffel bag. But it was the motive that shocked everyone. They didn't kill Grant out of rage. They didn't kill him in a moment of passion. They killed him for freedom and money. Marissa, with her polished public image, had orchestrated every piece. Cale, the shadow in her wake, had been the blade. Together, they constructed a fantasy of escape, believing they could outwit the system, vanish, and build a new life on ashes. But in the end, their perfect plan fell apart, not because of a mistake, but because someone had been watching, someone who cared enough to ask the right questions, someone who refused to accept a clean disappearance. Marissa Hale was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cale Mercer received the same. In separate courtrooms, they refused to look at one another. The silence between them said everything. Grant Hale was buried quietly, with only a few colleagues and distant relatives in attendance. No flowers, no eulogy, just the quiet settling of justice, long delayed, but no longer denied.